Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast, where you learn how to extract your business and personal deep wealth. I'm your host, Jeffrey Feldberg. This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth and the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience. When it comes to your business deep wealth, your exit or liquidity event is the most important financial decision of your life. But unfortunately, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Think about all that time and your hard-earned money wasted. Of the quote-unquote successful liquidity events, most business owners leave 50% to over 100% of the deal value in the buyer's pocket and don't even know it. I should know. I said no to a seven-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and the science of a liquidity event. 2 years later, I said yes to a different buyer with a 9-figure deal. Are you thinking about an exit or liquidity event? Don't become a statistic and make the fatal mistake of believing the skills that built your business are the same ones to sell it. After all, how can you master something you've never done before? Let the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience and the 9-step roadmap of preparation help you capture the best deal instead of any deal. At the end of this episode, take a moment and hear from business owners like you who went through the Deep Wealth Experience. After Tyler Horsley's career as a U.S. federal officer, having worked for 2 government agencies and a military contracting group, Tyler founded an organization called Nuclear Networking. Nuclear Networking is a business growth agency created in 2010. Tyler grew that organization to over $5 million in 5 years and ranked top 5% in the nation on the Inc. 5000 list and sold that to a private equity group in which he's now a partner. While running Nuclear Networking, Tyler has funded, grown, consulted, marketed, and sold several other companies, including a federal court reporting firm, a luxury retail product store, and many more. With years of M&A experience, Tyler focuses solely on business growth strategies for companies he buys, builds, consults, and sells. Tyler also has a strong passion for philanthropy. He currently sits on several boards and acts as an advisor for companies and believes in leveraging his skill sets and networking to rapidly increase the standards of living for humans around the world. He invests in several funds, companies, and ventures and has been blessed to meet and work with many influential movers in the space, including major politicians, musicians, marketers, and business growth experts. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. You heard it in the official introduction. We not only have a business owner, a thought leader, we have someone who has sold companies, is involved in M&A, is really paying it forward across all fronts of society, has some very ambitious goals, and is knocking it out of the park. So hang on to your hats. We have an absolutely terrific episode. I'm going to put a stop on it right there because Tyler, you're in the Deep Wealth House. Welcome. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. And Tyler, there's always a story behind the story. So what's your story, Tyler? What got you from where you were to where you are today?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, excited to be on. What got me to where I was to where I am today? Massive amounts of pain. So one of the things that I live by is you can learn from 2 different things. One is experience and the other is advice. And advice would be a lot cheaper and less painful if it's properly executed and applied, and experience painful and expensive in a sense. And so a lot of pain and luckily a lot of leadership through people that I look up to in my life and people who are willing to pour into me along the way. So to what extent would you like the story here?
Well, you know, what I really like about that, Tyler, right off the bat, you're not holding back because what you just said, we don't hear enough about. Actually, it's interesting. Just the other day, I was reading an article. They were interviewing, the founder of NVIDIA, which has just made massive gains out there recently in the marketplace in terms of its value. And they asked the founder, if you can go back to when you started 3 decades ago, what would you do? How would you approach business? And he said, I wouldn't do it. If I knew back then what I know today, I wouldn't go into business because it's so painful. And so you're sharing a very similar message here. And so let me ask you this, as you look back to some of those challenging times that you had across the different industries, what would be some of the biggest lessons or takeaways that you took from that?
Yeah, I would certainly still do it. I would do it, of course, a lot differently than I did prior. I learned through hitting walls at 100 miles an hour. So as an example, just to give the listeners some background, one of my initial businesses was a performance marketing organization. And we basically bootstrapped that, never took on debt, did the Fight Club story, literally operated out of a basement on bunk beds with my 2 other business partners eating ramen. Did that for a year and a half, at least. The success story, if I wanted to polish it, I could say we grew 100% year over year. It's easy to say that when you go from $1 to 2 and 2 to 4. But that aside, I guess one of the things that I would do differently is challenge my own perspective on value and hiring and how we treat people. And I think it's natural for business owners, and especially in startup stage, to look at cost efficiency when they're looking to source talent and human capital. And in most cases, with respect to all, you typically get what you pay for. And had I actually looked through the lens of opportunity cost and not the here and now money, obviously we need to be fiscally responsible to keep the doors open. I think that I could have made a lot more strides and hit success a lot earlier versus going through years and years of pain trying to do these things myself. And I think that's one of the biggest traps that I would try to avoid, is that entrepreneurial wear all hats and be all things to all people, which essentially leads to burnout very quickly. And also, if you look at this, the traditional employment world versus entrepreneurship, you've moved from 40 hours a week to 120, and you've basically created yourself a job in a prison. So not to start off negative, but those would be the things that I would reassess almost immediately.
Absolutely. You're talking about those very famous golden handcuffs, as it's called.
Nailed it.
Let me ask you this, though, Tyler. When you look back now from where you were and back in the day, however you defined success, and you fast forward to today, is it sounding different? Is it looking different for you in terms of what you've been through? Okay, I know when I first started out, success was A, B, and C, but actually not at all. Now it's D, E, and F. What's the difference, if there is one?
Yeah, I think just because different people start businesses for different reasons and in different states of mind, and some are highly ambitious, they come capitalized, and it's a hobby that they want to see become fruitful. Me, on the other hand, I was in a survival state. And so I came out of federal law enforcement, federal intelligence, did a change of career, and went all in. So it was either this or I can't pay my bills, which is a different operating system and perspective you look through. Hence I need to save money on people. Success initially was breathing oxygen. One of my friends, Brian, says that he calls money oxygen. It's like, I just need to breathe. I need to be able to cover my bills and those types of survival things. Now, what success is for me is, yes, covering bills and more, but it has a lot more to do with the ability to create scalable and sellable, or be a part of scalable and sellable organizations that actually provide impact. And that doesn't necessarily need to be 501c3 and nonprofit for everything. You can create liquidity and capital from those events and then redeploy it to the charity of your choice. You can still help, but being able to work with 5 to 10 qualified business owners just on the execution and the actual revenue generating piece, so that they can actually focus. Most visionaries don't want to focus and can't, frankly, operate every portion of a business. And so allowing them to do those things to see their own dreams fulfilled is one of my biggest passions. I know that sounds cliche, but if I had that help when I was first starting, it would have been tremendous, and it would have really accelerated my time and my execution. So that's, yeah.
And Tyler, let me ask you this, because it sounds like we both came from very humble beginnings, and I can absolutely relate of how you started off of, hey, this can be a slog. It's a lot of heavy lifting, one step forward, 5 steps back, and living in my parents' attic, starting my business right out of school, failure became my new best friend. I'm right there with you. And I absolutely relate to that. So let me ask you this, because I know to be an entrepreneur, to be a founder, the glass is always half full. Let's flip that for just a moment, because now you've gone through different industries. You've created incredible companies, nuclear networking being one of them, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But you're now in touch with many business owners. So from the glass half empty, when you're speaking with various businesses that have so much potential, they can really go out there and create a market disruption, yet they're the world's best kept secret. I'm being polite when I say it like that. Where, as founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, where are we getting it wrong? And in other words, the 80-20 principle, or Pareto's law, as some people call it, is it that 20% of the same mistakes are creating 80% of the problems that most of us are going through? And if the answer is yes, what would some of those be?
Yeah, I think just from an experience share Gestalt standpoint, one of the things that I have seen that people need is community. And I call that like a tribe. And so what that means is, as an example, I've joined local organizations, there's global organizations. YPO, EO, Vistage, et cetera. And the ability to get into a room for 4 to 6 hours a month with other business owners in completely different niches that are at a similar or greater revenue scale, and just be able to speak candidly about the biggest pains and experience share rapidly accelerates learning. Mm-hmm. I guess to summarize all of this, understanding where your weaknesses are as a leader and as an entrepreneur, what your highest and best use is and what is not, is one of the first things I do right out of the gate. That challenges ego, right? Mm-hmm. I can do this and I can do that and so on and so forth. And it's like, well, could somebody else be better fit in that space? So not to call the company or your baby ugly, but I think that's one of the biggest gaps is we do have that energy. And as entrepreneurs, we're weird people and we will just continue sprinting, even if that's off a cliff. And so trusting someone to come into your life, show you where those big holes are and where those opportunities are, and then formulating a process with that person or group to be able to see how do we get from A to Z more quickly, more efficiently, with less pain and less money. That's one of the first things that I've seen that a lot of entrepreneurs need. So people in their life that they trust inherently, that are qualified with a track record, and then allowing those people to essentially come in and create those systems for them would help.
Tyler, as you're talking about that, it's interesting because it reminds me, how many people do we know, business owners, founders, entrepreneurs, and everyone else really, they make a commitment, I'm going to get fit. I'm going to go to the gym, and they hire a trainer. Yet when it comes to the business, they're not hiring the trainer, otherwise known as a coach, or even someone like yourself or an M&A advisor. They're slogging it out on their own. It's like going to the gym. I know nothing about this, so it'll be trial and error. And maybe what I could have learned in one session with a trainer, it'll take me 6 months or a year and possibly hurt myself or just get into a lot of pain, get frustrated, not get that progress. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts. And I think as entrepreneurs, again, I just speak for myself. I wanted success yesterday. I wanted these things to work yesterday. And it's like, yeah, definitely, I guess you've heard, if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. And that's certainly a trap that I think entrepreneurs can thrust themselves into.
And so what's interesting with what you're doing at Nuclear Networking, it's also part of what you would do as an M&A advisor, particularly as perhaps a chief revenue officer or a growth officer, or you're helping someone on the leadership side or prepare for some kind of liquidity event. So what would be some of the themes? Because there is a method to your madness. What's your secret sauce as you're putting all that together?
Yeah. So I'd say having an awareness of what is missing and being able to clearly communicate that. So whether that be launch plans, how to grow your business, preparing for a liquidity event, those aren't things that I build, design, and more. But if I am able to work with an organization, founder, entrepreneur, that's something that I can very clearly see if there's a lack of, or it doesn't exist. And so where I really shine, so to speak, is that fractional CRO, CMO, and having that M&A experience, basically revenue generation. So I stay away from the word marketing because it's super generic. It could be anything from email marketing to SMS to driving traffic, which is what a lot of people focus on, SEO, SEM, but really helping businesses understand the why, ripping off Simon Sinek shamelessly. But if I lined you up with 10 different customers and you only had 10 seconds to tell me why I should choose you instead of somebody else in your space who's a competitor, what would you say? Most business owners immediately default to family owned, Better Business Bureau rating of, it's just so generic. No, and as a customer, especially in an ADHD culture where we have less than 10 seconds to capture somebody's attention, if we can't stop them from scrolling and get them to engage in an offer that they would feel foolish saying no to, we're doing it wrong. Tangible with clear attribution, like revenue generating activities. That's what I do. And you can appreciate this too, of course, with your background and what you folks do really well. When you go to sell your organization, if you can show upward proven trajectory and you can show proven funnels that actually produce massive amounts of revenue, actual execution on that side, that goes really far when you want to sell your organization. You need to be able to show them it's not all riding on one specific entrepreneur, the entire company's success. There's actually a platform and a system. And that's really the areas I love focusing in, is producing that revenue and executing.
So Tyler, when it comes to revenue and when it comes to executing, we've had really a perfect storm for disruption out there. And if you think about this, came out of the pandemic, now you have AI, which is all the rage, and we've had all kinds of incredible macroeconomic events. But, really, you can fill in the blanks, and whether it's now or 10 years from now, there'll be maybe different headlines, but similar kinds of things. But as we sit here today for this podcast, For you, what's changed? Let's say compared to today versus 12 months ago or 48 months ago, 24 months ago, what would be some of the big differences that I need to be aware of as I'm out there operating my business?
Sure. Well, as a provider, I would say B2B customer sentiment has changed significantly. So if you're serving another business
Hmm.
and that's your core deliverable versus just serving products or a standard customer, sentiment, fear index, a lot of these things, since you referenced AI, like we monitor a lot of those often. You can use those in trading algorithms and anticipation for building out marketing opportunity analysis and projections and more based on what are people talking about, what's the fear index at. And basically, fear index is just an AI intent algorithm. And so you can start archiving and crawling Reddit, Discord, and the entire world of news and basically consolidate through different keyword mapping, like what are people talking about and is it positive or negative and how's that going to drive commerce? And so one of the things I guess I would be aware of in the business world right now and what's changed specific to AI is as it relates to Google, their algorithm, what's important, how to rank, basically how to drive more qualified leads, like content generation is changing rapidly.
Hmm.
So unique content, Google continues, at least at the time of this recording, to say, do not use ChatGPT to create content for your website. We'll be able to find out. That's not the case. They can estimate and they can use, basically, they're crawling the internet. And there's even platforms and tools online you can add your content to. Teachers are doing this right now. What's the likelihood this was created by AI? 70%. So, well, you can fix that fairly quickly by basically command prompts, change the tone of this and write it in Morgan Freeman's voice. And now it's not as easily picked up because it's being mapped off of a human. And so anyway, right now, I guess as a business owner, one leg up that you do have is creating massive amounts of pre-optimized content for your website. I would take advantage of that before they do find a way to fix that. That's something that I've seen change dramatically. I can just speak from the SEO and SEM industry standpoint. In the next 5 years, my prediction is what people will be paying for is thought leadership and strategy. So what you guys do for organizations, what I can do for organizations, the Oracle level mapping and strategy for the entire company and their growth and more. But all the busy work will be more than likely automated. So tags, descriptions, content, you name it.
It's a different world, and it continues to be a different world every day as AI progresses and makes all of these changes. And it's even hard to imagine. I love your thought on this. We're going down a little bit of an AI rabbit hole, but that's okay.
Sure.
When I speak to people in AI, they're saying, Jeffrey, today, where we are in terms of IQ for AI, we're right around where Albert Einstein is. But if you fast forward, and we're not talking very long, it could be between the next 2 to 5 years max, AI will be at a 3,000 level of IQ. And they said, imagine that for a moment. Try to imagine as us trying to figure out what it's like to be an ant from an IQ level that we're not going to understand these AIs and they won't necessarily understand us because we're so much below them in terms of IQ. What's your takeaway from that in terms of how does that impact me today and what I need to know going forward as a business owner?
You opened the door. So you remember the Terminator, right? So the entire premise of that entire movie was the AI itself was initially built to protect. And so as a business owner, and I know topically, we don't need to go down doom and gloom or anything like that, but it's like if quantum computing or any higher computing power is possible, I highly agree with you very quickly and even more quickly than 5 or 10 years, 3,000 times the metric that you communicated IQ, super possible. For every data set that ever existed in the entire internet. And with quantum computing, if you look at the listeners, if you're AI nerds, you can look this up, but like the 3-color problem. If you have blue, red, yellow, can you continually duplicate that in perpetuity without any color touching? And it seems really simple, but if you can create a computer or an algorithm to solve like a 3-color problem, you can crack multi-bit passwords on Bitcoin wallet. You can get into government. Like it gets scary very quickly. And then you look at business. I think there will be a short sprint where organizations will be using that for marketing and otherwise, and where you can source intent instantaneously and formulate ad copy and more to best cater to your consumers. But if that happens, I see a consolidation of industries, and this is already happening right now. So there's private equity groups buying up all furniture stores, mom and pop furniture stores around the United States, because if you have keys to here's what works and here's how to get individuals to buy, you immediately almost have not necessarily a guarantee, but a lot better guarantee than you would have otherwise of success. So a lot of these private equity groups, banks are consolidating, companies are consolidating, and more. And so, as odd as it sounds, I think that it's super important for companies to start thinking about, is my company sellable? Do I have a platform where I could actually sell it to a private equity firm? Am I prepared for a liquidity event? What does that kind of look like? Because what I'm seeing, at least in our local, we talked before the show here in Denver, even in the health and beauty space, med spas, you name it, plastic surgery centers, they're being rolled up by these conglomerates. And so what the company, what the organizations might look like in 5 to 10 years, it might be a lot more consolidated than you think as a result of a lot of this AI capability, which directly correlates to funding. And these bigger companies have the money to continue to explore that. And I think they'll be able to exponentially win quicker. And so, yeah, those are some thoughts.
And so, Tyler, taking what you just shared, and we're going way out there in terms of
I know.
big picture, which I absolutely love, but actually it's a terrific segue because in our 9-step roadmap, in the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program, we start with step 1, the big picture. And this is where you identify inflection points. And if someone's not really familiar with an inflection point, is what's changing in your industry or in society, that if you ignore that, it can put you out of business, or if you capture it early enough, you can actually put yourself out of business and go into a bigger business. So Tyler, what we were speaking about right now with AI as an example, that is absolutely an inflection point. It absolutely is big picture. So if I'm an organization, I'm a company, and I'm, okay, Tyler, heard what you do. I saw how you're helping other companies. I love that. Why don't you come on in as a CRO or as a strategist or M&A advisor for a company and help us navigate this very uncertain future? Can you walk us through what does that look like with your process or your system, and timeline wise, what can I expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as you can imagine, you guys are very process oriented. I am as well. I come from government, so it's built my DNA, which is strange, but I basically undergo an initial discovery of walking through what I call like an offer generation workshop. Again, back to the why, formulating objective driven campaigns. And I know I'm starting from marketing. There's a lot of other platform assessments that are needed, but essentially learning goals, current status, core differentiators. It's a lot of learning and conversating first. Then from there, we can I would identify basically opportunities, loss leaders, specific objectives for the organization and where we want to go, and work backwards. So it's like, if we want to do X, Y, and Z, or if we're considering these opportunities in the future, well, in order to be sellable, we actually need to have proven platforms that actually produce revenue. We need stable, recurring marketing and basically channels, sales funnels, if you will, that kind of can predict. And that way you can hand your entire company, if a liquidity event is in your future, to the next buyer and say, here's the roadmap and the steps 1 through 5 on how to run this thing and how to continue growing it in perpetuity. So from a marketing perspective, I start out with company DNA. Who are you? Who do you want? And how can we offer value to society? From there, do we have the proper foundation and stability to actually build this thing? No, most companies don't have an adequate CRM, sales funnel or automation, sales team. They're not following up with leads. If they did scale and hit their goals, they have 50 million new customers a month. Can they handle that? If not, what does that look like? And so just bringing awareness to those types of things is essentially, yes, it's one part, but actually executing on it is an entirely separate part. And that's when we put together custom plans for execution. So,
and Tyler, because you've been out there, you've done this for your own companies. You're now doing this for other companies, other business owners that are out there. Again, going back to one of the earlier questions, as business owners, with what you're doing and what you're seeing, yes, you've been down this path, you have that experience, you have both the hindsight and the foresight to do that. For a lot of organizations, they just can't get past go, it seems.
Right.
And that's why someone like yourself can come in and really unlock the blinders so they can now go in, hey, let's put the CRM system in place, or let's put these strategies in place. We're now going to welcome, whether it's through the SEO or through the marketing, to begin bringing in new prospects, and we're going to enhance our sales process. So when you're going through all of that, really starting from where we are today with most companies, which probably isn't great, to having you optimize them, get to where ultimately they want to be, and they are increasing the revenues, the profits, enterprise values going up with that. timing wise and cost wise, and I know you would be very right to say, well, Jeffrey, listen, it depends on the company, it depends where they are, it depends what's needed. But back of the envelope, ballpark wise, where are we with time and cost for something like that for most companies?
Sure. Yeah, most companies, a part of the funnel process, offer generation workshop, and more, typically timeline is one, free discovery. And I know that goes against the rules of scalability. That continues to stick out in my head. So there's a pre-qualification process of, is your company in ideation phase, or are you actually funded, and do you have an initial platform, right? It's not necessarily the dream of I want to start a company, but it's I already have and I can't break through these barriers. So if companies meet that platform, whether they're SMBs or even larger organizations, tend to have been doing things as they do in the past, like legacy. I see this a lot in the ERP space. People are still selling and implementing ERP platforms from the early 2000s. Whoa, it's just kind of Frankenstein built on, and there's no incentive in the market to actually redevelop that because that's the only thing that really exists. So I always start out with kind of a free discovery process and education. I think education cures anxiety, especially with business owners. It's a respectful way to start, just kind of uncovering, hey, here's the opportunity, here's what exists. So they even know what's possible, because there's that voice in your head as an entrepreneur, the stories we tell ourselves. And it's, man, I just can't break through this. What does that look like? And I don't want to pay another, consultant to tell me X, Y, and Z. So start out with a free piece there. Then we would move into funnel, the objective driven offer. And I know you're looking for a time frame, maybe on even a larger scale, but actually the offer generation workshop, we don't need to solve all of the business problems. It's almost nearly impossible to execute on all those immediately. But prioritizing after that discovery, what's first, typically the offer generation workshop is the best. Just so if you're in business at all, your customers need to clearly understand who you are, the value, the pain you're healing, the goals you're helping them reach. That's what that workshop achieves. From that workshop, we build our first funnel, right? We set up the CRM. All of that entire process is typically a month or less. Once you have that entire vehicle, then you can start A/B testing and driving qualified traffic to bring revenues up. Typically, revenues make entrepreneurs more happy, provides more capital for hiring more quality talent, and these things just start to compound. And so most of that data and the entire process can occur in 4 months or less, and likely for 30,000 or less for most SMBs.
It's not a lot of time, big picture wise, and really is not a lot of money when you think about, okay,
Right.
here's big picture wise how I can increase my revenues, my profit, my enterprise value. As we like to say, Deep Wealth, if you made one less mistake, then Tyler, that cost of entry is an ROI. It's not even a cost. It's a
Right.
profit for you. You're going to get a very nice return on investment. And here's something I just want to run by you, and I may be on base or off base with this. So with nuclear networking, you've taken that company and you're consistently ranked in the top 5%, and the growth is absolutely incredible. You're getting a lot of exposure to different industries, different businesses. And
Yep.
then I would imagine that based on what you're seeing, you're also now applying this into your strategy in regards to a CRO, a CMO, or into M&A advisory. So
Mhm.
with all of that said, anything that's really jumping off the page of some big changes? I know we talked about AI just before that. Anything else that you're seeing out there in the online or brick and mortar that's really interesting for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, absolutely. So in addition to those things, and you're right, just to expand on that further, I've had the privilege of growing over 2,200 businesses in the last 10 years. The amount of mental chaos, I mean, in my head, like a massive amounts of data, of course, anonymized data sets and more. But when you're able to see these things, much like you guys have worked with a lot of organizations, there are foundational business patterns and basically repeatable things that we can quickly implement and activate in companies to get quick wins, right? So back to the 80-20 rule that you referenced prior, it's like it can work in reverse. It's what are the 20% of things that we need to do in this organization to get 80% more acceleration? And so one of the biggest things that I've seen, and it might seem simple, but when I build, buy, and sell my own organizations, which I do as well, or empower entrepreneurs that may not have the resources to get started, but may have a lot of promise and just basically accelerate 5 to 10 years of hitting a brick wall, making hiring mistakes, not having the resources or the network to actually bloom. We can shorten that down to 1 or 2 years and actually help them hit bigger numbers quicker. Before building any website, I would recommend building a funnel. So what does that even mean? What's like for all of my organizations, I could go out and hire an artist By the way, websites, very important, etc. But it's a guess. So there's a difference between art and conversion rate optimization and the ability to see from a statistical data standpoint, like how should I design my site? What language should be on there? What offers do people care about and don't they care about? And how do I differentiate myself? You can go spend 20 to 50K on a website and guess, and then drive traffic and learn. What I do for all of our organizations and then individuals that I help is we create micro experiments. So if you've read the book, Great by Choice, pretty much anything by Jim Collins, one of the big things he says is like fire bullets before cannonballs, low cost, low distraction experiments that yield qualified data to inform future decisions. So simplified, let's create one specific, maybe 1 to 3 different variations of offers for your company on a low cost, low distraction landing page and funnel. And let's go test it in the market and learn what works for our organization and what doesn't in less than 4 months, back to opportunity cost. We can wing it on our own for 5 years, or we can learn all this stuff in less than half a year. And then let's use that data to inform what the future website and brand and more should look like. And then go spend 20 grand, just using that as a loose number. But that's one of the biggest things I've learned. And I know that seems simple, but it's accelerated learning. It allows the entrepreneur to very quickly go to market, learn what works and what doesn't. And then it informs future cost and future marketing allocation, which is one of the biggest line items on your P&L right now, other than human capital.
Absolutely. And as you're going through that, Tyler, really, you're taking me back to a whole topic. It's a passion of mine, what I call the cockroach startup mindset. And this is where you're bootstrapping, very similar to what you had done. I had done the same thing. And as a cockroach startup, because we're bootstrapping, our mission is to do whatever it takes to live another day. Yeah. And so how often do we hear about these private equity backed companies? And nothing wrong with private equity. There's no judgment here. Their KPI is, what's your burn rate? How much money are you spending? And the quicker you can spend it, the better. Whereas what you're advocating with the funnel is, hey, what works for you? How do we spend the least amount of money to find out what's the most effective? And then, wow, once we know what works, we're going to open up the zeros and the checkbooks and the bank accounts, and we're going to just go full force because we know it works. We know it has a proven ROI, and we're going to maximize that as we're going out there with the message and the marketing strategy. Thoughts about that?
Yeah. One of the things I think is worth admitting as an entrepreneur is listener might not be the person to do all of that. And I think by nature, we try to take this upon ourselves and, okay, great. I've listened to this qualified advice. I'm going to go do this and try to figure this out and deploy this on my own. You have very limited bandwidth, both literal and emotional and financial. And so back to my original comment, being able to hire where hiring is due, value of human capital, experience, and opportunity cost there. Highly advantageous if somebody's perspective allows them to see, maybe I should prioritize this first versus living through the cockroach mindset, which is like, how do I just pay bills tomorrow? Because unless you strike gold, that almost never ends. And even if we as entrepreneurs, we get what we think we want. Here's tons more revenue. Are you scalable? Can your company handle that? Do you have the right human capital in place? Or even do you have processes to actually scale from 10 to a million customers? And in most cases, in most businesses that I work with, the answer is no. And so before we even drive business, hey, we need to tap into partnership resources for process and this type of thinking.
And as you're going through that, what comes to mind, Tyler? And I'd love your thoughts on this, because I know there's listeners, and you and I, we speak to business owners in the marketplace, and I'd be very surprised if your experience was any different. When we're out there, we're speaking to the business owners, the founders, the entrepreneurs. Hey, Tyler. Hey, Jeffrey, I hear you. Yes, what you're saying is really important. I'm really busy today and tomorrow, but maybe I'll get to it the next day or the next quarter when I take a little bit of a break and I'm not so busy. And you and I know they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. It's never going to happen. They only get busier. What would you say to that business owner who is telling him or herself that narrative of how and why they must absolutely stop that and really open up their eyes to see what's going on?
I would only speak from experience, but I mean, simple things, and this kind of applies to a lot in life. If you could have fixed it, you would have already. And where were you last quarter and what's changed since then? At the rate of AI and the market moving, and I don't like to use fear as a motivator, but it's like this entire world's different. What was different in the world a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? What's changed now? Seriously, it is rapid paced. It's crazy. If you want to wait, your competitors likely aren't. Where are they going to be in a month, in a quarter, and how far ahead of you and how much catch up? So it's like, these are real data points. You don't even need to hire me. Like, this is just truth. If you can sit on the bench and try to do things yourself, I would ask why. Is it money savings? Is that why? Or do you think you have this thing cracked? And so I guess just finding out those answers, but it's what else would you do instead? And if you could have fixed it already, you would have. And so these are the things that I just questions, because the reality is it's really my job isn't to change anyone's mind. It's just to help them think about bigger picture things and ask some of the questions that they may not have asked. And, if there's other individuals, again, in their network, that's why the value of network defines net worth, right? So it's, do you have people in your life that can challenge you openly and say, hey, you're missing this over here. This is a big vulnerability and it's going to hurt. It's going to be expensive. If you don't, you're just operating in an echo chamber. You're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities and it'll probably be an expensive learning experience. So
absolutely. Words to the wise. Tyler, let me ask you this before we go into wrap up mode, because we're starting to bump up against some time here. With every episode, wherever possible, we like the listener to have one action item. So before we even wrap up, and certainly before the listener goes into that next meeting or that phone call or that email, if the listener could do one thing that could really move the dial for their business success, or even their peace of mind or calmness or clarity, whatever it's going to be, what would be that one action that you'd recommend?
If I only am able to give them one, I would highly recommend that they prioritize finding mentors in their specific industry who have done far greater than they have monetarily so far, because what you're really going to learn there, you don't need, and they won't be, a true mentor is not going to just be a cheerleader. They will tell you, here's 50 walls I hit at 100 miles an hour that hurt. Here's how you can avoid those. So if it's only one piece of advice, find a mentor. That mentor should not be a customer. That's super important. You want to keep that relationship sacred. You do not want to sell them, ask them for money. Do anything that you can for that wisdom, because that wisdom can save you millions of dollars and years.
Terrific advice. And for our listeners, you know what? We've heard it before. It's said really in different ways. Birds of a feather flock together, or the 5 people that you spend the most time with, you're the average of those people. And so, Tyler, what you're saying, hey, find a mentor. And great advice, don't let it be a customer or someone involved on the business side who's perhaps been down that path and can give you some sage advice. Absolutely love that. Well, Tyler, let's go into wrap-up mode here. And I know I say this on every podcast, but it's the absolute truth. It's really the privilege and honor for me to be able to ask this question. It's a tradition here on the Deep Wealth Podcast. It's a fun one, so let me set this up for you. When you think of the movie Back to the Future, you have very incredible, magical, powerful DeLorean car that can take you to any point in time. So imagine now it's tomorrow morning, and it's a fun part here. You look outside your window, the door is open, and Tyler, the car is waiting for you to hop on in, which you do, and you're now going to go back to any point in your life. Tyler, as a young child or a teenager, whatever point in time that would be, what are you telling your younger self in terms of life wisdom or lessons learned? Or, hey, Tyler, do this, but don't do that. What would it sound like?
It's going to be super cheesy. Put your entire life savings into Bitcoin and sell at 60,000.
Okay.
Seriously. And I know that sounds pathetic, but just background is I am very values based. I wouldn't necessarily dodge mistakes I've made because they've been big learning opportunities for me. But if I have more capital to deploy now with what I knew, with what I know, I could do more good. And so that's the quickest way I could think of generating capital. There's been billionaires made from that fun little coin. So yeah.
Yeah. What a thought experiment. As founders, here we are really slogging away and early mornings, late nights. And here, if you have just the right investment advice, there you go, at least in terms of checking one of the boxes for financial wealth. So
yeah, more values driven advice other than just getting rich. My advice, it would probably just be encouragement. And I think one of the biggest pieces of encouragement is I've done a lot of personal work around killing ego. It sounds strange, and I'm not a megalomaniac or anything like that, but that's been perspective shift has been one of the best teachers in my life. Being able to uncover, and it's not even how to become a better leader and reading all these books. It's why am I messed up? What's underneath that? How can I heal wounds from childhood all the way up? And what is that really doing? If you look at us as computers, that is genuinely informing your operating system. That's what you're operating on. So I would encourage myself to do that work sooner, because an ego can't understand anything greater than itself. So back to what would you tell a business owner tomorrow? It's like, well, would they listen? Is a whole nother question. And so that ego prevented me from learning and seeing other people's perspectives in life, both in and out of business. And having that perspective earlier would have helped significantly.
I love that. So check your ego at the door. Get past your ego as quickly as possible is some terrific advice. And let's face it, all of us have an ego. It's a matter of how much are we keeping that in check, or are we letting it get the better of us? That's some wonderful advice. Well, Tyler, that said, before we wrap things up, if somebody has a question, hey, yeah, you know what, Tyler, I would love for you to take a look at our company and through nuclear networking, get us from zero to hero. Or, hey, why don't you come in and help us grow our revenue or something in between? Where's the best place for somebody to find you online?
Yeah, best place is one of two. And I'm mentioning two so I don't look unprofessional, but tyler@nuclearnetworking.com. So that's easy. And then nuclear homes, as in like a home you live in, @gmail.com.
Terrific. And you know what? For our listeners, Tyler just gave us some personal email addresses. So why don't you take him up on his offer, reach out to him, ask those questions, have that conversation. You'll walk away a whole lot more insightful and better forward than when you first came in. And it's a terrific use of time. Well, Tyler, it's official. Congratulations. This is a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
The Deep Wealth experience was definitely a game changer for me.
This course is one of the best investments you will ever make because you will get an ROI of 100 times that. Anybody who doesn't go through it will lose millions.
If you don't have time for this program, you'll never have time for a successful liquidity.
I mean, it was the best value of any business course I've ever taken. The money was very well spent.
Compared to when we first began, today I feel better prepared, but in some respects, maybe less prepared, not because of the course, but because the course brought to light so many things that I thought we were on top of that we need to fix.
I 100% believe there's never a great time for a business owner to allocate extra hours into his or her week or day. So it's an investment that will yield results today. I thought I will reap the benefit of this program in 3 to 5 years down the road. But as soon as I stepped forward into the program, my mind changed immediately.
There was so much value in the experience that the time I invested paid back so much for the energy that was expended.
The Deep Wealth experience compared to other programs is the top. What we learned is very practical. Sometimes you learn stuff that is great to learn, but you never use it. The stuff we learned from Deep Wealth experience, I believe is going to benefit us both.
I've done an executive MBA. I've worked for billion-dollar companies before. I've worked for smaller companies before I started my business. I've been running my business successfully now for getting close to a decade. We're on a growth trajectory. Reflecting back on the Deep Wealth, I knew less than 10% what I know now. Maybe close to 1% even.
Hands down the best program in which I've ever participated. And we've done a lot of different things over the years. We've been in other mastermind groups, gone to many seminars, workshops, conferences, retreats, read books. This was so different. I haven't had an experience that's anything close to this in all the years that we've been at this. It's 5-star, A+.
I would highly recommend it to any super busy business owner out there. And Deep Wealth is an accurate name for it. This program leads to deeper wealth and happier wealth, not just deeper wealth. I don't think there's a dollar value that could be associated with such an experience and knowledge that could be applied today and forever.
Are you leaving millions on the table? Please visit www.deepwealth.com/success to learn more. If you're not on my email list, you'll want to be. Sign up at www.deepwealth.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, if it added value, if you walked away with some new insights and strategies, please leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Reviews help us reach new listeners, grow the show, and continue to create content that you'll enjoy. And as we wrap up this episode, as always, please stay healthy and safe.